Hello, my name's Mark Evershed, and I promised last week to do something on the pivot, and I want to do something maybe between 7 and 10 minutes today. And I just want to kind of do a short one today because I have a very large email blast coming out in about a week, and it's going to be more detailed about the pivot of the golf swing. Now, let me give you some definitions before we go forwards. The swing is made up of the club, your hands, and your arms. To me, that is the golf swing. It is a separate unit from the pivot. The reason that is so necessary for you to learn is because you've decided to play a game that stuff goes wrong. When something goes wrong, it doesn't mean everything broke. It means a piece broke. So your job is to fix the piece that broke. The alternative is, if the ball goes bad, where do you look? You don't know what piece broke. So does that mean the whole total broke? So what do you do? So I think what I just said makes the golf game easier, makes the learning of what the ball does better and easier so that you fix the piece that's broken and leave the rest alone. The pivot is extraordinarily unheralded. It sure is not the sexy thing to teach. It's not necessarily fun to learn, although we should be able to make it fun. The pivot is usually important because it's the thing that allows you to get the golf club back on the golf ball consistently well. Or, if you have a bad pivot, you get the club back on the ball consistently poorly. If you knew how to make a correct pivot, we would see more people on the driving ranges doing it. Oh, even better said, if we could tell people what's in it for them, if they do it correctly, I think you'd see a lot more people doing it. Here's how I want you to take a look at this. I always come from the point of view of you've got to tell the person what's in it for them, and you have to tell them what the result will be if they do it correctly, so that when they do it, they go, okay, so I want to learn to do it better. The best lesson I ever have gotten in my life was the understanding that my job is to get my hands in the correct position and learn how to allow them to stay in the correct position through the golf ball. I'm going to suggest to you, without a correct pivot, it's just about impossible to do. When I get this golf club in motion, it's traveling up to, if it's going like 100 miles an hour, the weight at the end of the stick is kind of equal to 40 pounds. So the thing gets pretty heavy. If I am not in position to handle it, I'm certainly not strong enough to stop it from doing bad things. If the pivot is correct, you can use your leverage to be in such a position that it makes it hard for the hands to break down. Your final want and goal for all of us in golf is to get the club head back onto the golf ball correctly. If I'm out of position, my hands are going to snap or do something, and you do not want your hands to snap. On an earlier YouTube, I talked about how the hands have to be educated. They do not snap. They do not roll over. In my opinion, they should not release. Or if you like the term release, you better learn more about it, because 99% of the people have the wrong understanding of what release means. So it's not a good thing. So the hands are. For me, in order to get my hands to work correctly, I have to pivot in such a way that there's like offsetting forces, and it makes it hard for my hands to break down. What I like to tell people, just even for an opening line, is that I want to see people like on top of the golf ball. And to a lot of people, it'll almost feel like you're ahead of it. If you've been doing this for any length of time, when you get on top of it, you're going to feel like you're ahead of it. But don't even take my word for it. Just see if this doesn't make sense. If the truth is when you go through a golf ball, let's say for a right-hander, if the truth is that you want your left wrist to be flat or even arched, and you want your right wrist to be bent, retaining lag pressure, and you're just going to keep hearing more and more and more about retaining lag pressure as a commentator as this year goes, it's probably going to be the new catchword this year, lag pressure. It's been around forever, but it'll probably start catching on now. If you can buy into that being the truth, then you have to learn how to move the body in such a way that allows you to retain those angles. From behind the golf ball, that right wrist is going to give way somehow, some way. You don't want it to. If you're on top of the golf ball, it makes it very possible for that left wrist to remain flat and the right wrist to remain bent. I created my weight shift monitor years ago to give me instant feedback, because I don't trust myself, and I don't trust that any of you need to trust yourself to make sure you're doing it. Say, now if you can relate that this is okay, then I'm going to suggest you relate. If you can understand this, that impact is different than address. Impact position of a golf shot is different than the address position. If you can correlate those two motions, now you're starting to get something. So I take the golf club back, sure, my shoulders rotate and all that sort of thing, and I'll get into that in my full-length version of that. That's not hard. It's not hard to learn to do that. You take anybody in the world and just say do this and they can do it. It's not like you have to be a golfer. I mean, anyone can do this. It's not really hard. Doing it properly is a little bit tougher. Doing it properly and not knowing how to do it is not too wise. So I'm not going to worry too much about the turning the shoulders and hips at the moment. I really want you to get a really good understanding that I'm trying to. If I go, it's like correlating. I gave a lesson the other day, and I talked to the gentleman, and I just said to him, here, let me take a guess at this. I said to him, I'll bet you when you have apple pie, you probably have milk. And I said to him, I'll bet you when you have pizza, you have pop. So, hey, it doesn't take a great, magician here to figure those two. There's something right about it. So in my mind, when I'm hitting a golf ball, I relate that. I relate this, and I don't want this. So I've got to learn to retain my center on top of the golf ball, and I believe that's what allows me to keep my left wrist flat, my right wrist bent. Now, I hope that's enough to tweak your interest in learning as much as you can about the pivot of the golf swing. Again, I would suggest to you, the swing is the club, your hands, and your arms. It is not hard to get a good swing. Learning to get a good pivot really isn't that hard either if you go into it trying to learn it. If you know what one is, and then you try to learn it, it doesn't take a long time. If you are naive about it, even worse. If you have the wrong understanding of what a good pivot is, even worse. Hope you enjoy that. Keep seeking out anyone that is hitting the golf ball inconsistently, making inconsistent contact, fat and thin, heel and toe. The pivot is the thing that you really need to learn about.